Now that we understand the terminology of typefaces, let's move on to historic classifications. Just like terminology, it's all about the details when looking at classifications. Understanding these details will help you understand why certain conventions have been adopted and used throughout history. This will help you have a greater appreciation for the mastery level it takes to create fonts that work every day. So let's jump in and look at some of the classifications. We'll be starting by looking at some serif typefaces first, and then we're going to move into sans serifs. Serif typefaces are easily defined by the little feet that they have on the letter forms. First, we have Garamond, which would be classified as an old-style serif typeface. It has certain attributes that make it old-style. We notice that the stress of the rounded letter forms are at an angle. The thickest parts are at a slight angle as well. This one is around 11 to 13 degrees. We also notice that the tops of the serifs on the lowercase letters are also at an angle, and the serifs are bracketed. That means that there's a transition point where the serif moves smoothly into the stroke like so. Next, we have transitional typefaces like Baskerville. They have an angle that is less steep, meaning they are approaching vertical but not quite. There is also more contrast between thick and thin strokes of the letter forms. You also see that the tops of the serifs are at a smaller angle, or at times they can be a perfect 90-degree angle. Here we're going to compare old style versus transitional. You'll see the transitional typeface has a wider character and is rounder in comparison to the old style. Now we have Bodoni, which is classified as a modern serif typeface. You'll see it has extreme contrast between thick and thin strokes of the letter forms. And now the emphasis is horizontal and vertical. There's no bracketing for the serifs either. Something else that is interesting is when designing modern typefaces, the uppercase letters are more uniformed in character width than previous serifs. If you look at the M and the W, you'll see they squeeze them in just a little bit to condense them for use. And conversely, they took the T and the P and they pushed them out a little bit. These slight changes help to create uniformity in the letter forms. Next we have Memphis, which falls underneath the slab serif family, or also known as Egyptian. Now you'll see that the stress of the curved strokes is often very minimal. The thick and thin transition is very little, and some are actually uniformed in their stroke width. You'll also notice the heavier square serifs with no bracketing. They have very, very sharp edges as well. Now we have Grotesque, and this is Franklin Gothic. There is some varied contrast in the stroke width, and the curved strokes are usually terminated obliquely or at an angle. When you're trying to classify typefaces, a telltale sign is the curved strokes. Ask yourself, do they end with a sharp edge or are they terminated in an oblique angle? That small detail will help you narrow down the classification. Next, we're moving into Neo-Grotesque. This is Helvetica, and you'll notice it has less contrast in the stroke width, and the curved strokes usually terminate at a horizontal. This typeface is one of the most revered typefaces of all time, and once you really study it, you're going to see that it's really used everywhere in the world today. Now we evolve into the Humanist. This is Gill Sans. These letters are slightly more calligraphic. The curved strokes usually terminate in a horizontal, and there are certainly quirks to this style. It is similar to the old style serif fonts, but it fits the sans serif typefaces because it doesn't have little feet. This style is more of a nod to where we came from regarding our history with thick and thin strokes of a pen. Another unique feature of the Humanist typeface is the A and the G are what we call two-storied. The G also has an ear and the loop is open. I will contrast this with the single-story typeface next when we discuss geometric. Last we have geometric, and this typeface is Futura. There is very little variation in the stroke width, and here you'll see that the A and G are single-storied, unlike the Humanist style that is double-storied. As you can see, there's a ton of important information that you're going to need to remember and study before you start using typefaces in your design. Take the time to study these classifications more in depth and compare the terminology of the letter parts for each classification. The more you study letter forms, the better you'll become at pairing them together in the future.